The great halls of the imperial spire shuddered as detonations shook the foundations of the ancient citadel. The alien Empress stood on the upper terrace with her cloak sweeping behind her, watching the horizon where enemy warships descended in burning streaks. Her empire had been strong once, known across star clusters for unmatched fleets and iron discipline. Now it trembled under the weight of a ruthless invasion that had pierced every border and shattered every line of defense. The invading force advanced without hesitation, and the Empress knew they were now only minutes from reaching the heart of her palace. She had prepared herself for this last stand, believing her royal guard would hold the line with unwavering loyalty. Instead, fear corroded their resolve. When the sky roared and the enemy walkers thundered toward the gates, her guards exchanged glances and broke. They scattered down the stairway with trembling limbs and lowered heads. The Empress watched them flee, each step leaving a deeper wound in her spirit. Betrayal had become a familiar shadow in this war, yet it still stung. She remained where she stood, hands clasped behind her back, refusing to run. She had been raised to face defeat with dignity and to meet fate with her crown upright. Silence followed for a long moment until a single set of footsteps approached. Slow, steady, purposeful. A tall human warrior moved through the wind that carried the scent of burning metal. His name was Darren. He had arrived months ago as part of a minor diplomatic escort at a time when humans hesitated to involve themselves in distant conflicts. His first impression on the court had been quiet but firm, and although he had been welcomed as an observer, none had expected him to take part in the Empire's struggles. Yet from the moment the war reached the capital, he had stepped forward without waiting to be asked. He had no rank in her army. He had no obligation. Still he remained while trained soldiers ran. He reached the Empress and stood slightly behind her, facing the oncoming storm. The Empress spoke without turning her head. She asked why he stayed when the others fled. Darren answered that everyone else saw an empire collapsing, but he saw a leader still standing. He said that was enough for him to stand as well. She breathed slowly at those words. Many had sworn loyalty to her throne, but only he honored it in the hour of ruin. The enemy walkers crossed the final ridge. They towered with angular limbs and glowing cores, each step sending tremors across the courtyard. Fighter drones swarmed overhead with piercing sounds that echoed through the valley. The palace's outer gates cracked under the first barrage of plasma fire. The Empress had seen battles before, but never with stakes so absolute. She turned to Darren and warned him that this final defense was doomed. No reinforcement was coming. No escape route remained. Darren did not flinch. He said he knew. He said doom did not frighten him because he had lived enough years, watching weak hearts decide the fate of worlds. If this last stand meant protecting someone who still held faith in her people, then he would fight it without regret. The Empress studied him for a brief moment. His posture was stable, his breathing calm, and his eyes sharper than steel. She wondered how a man without armor or noble title carried such confidence. She had legends of human resilience from old archives, but never truly believed them until now. A thunderous crack signaled the collapse of the outer wall. Through the cloud of dust emerged an enemy vanguard of heavy infantry. They marched in rigid lines with armor glistening in the firelight. Their commander raised a staff that sparked with hostile energy. He signaled the order to advance. Darren stepped forward. The Empress called after him, insisting she could not allow him to face them alone. He told her she would not be alone, because every moment he bought would keep her alive and keep hope breathing in the empire he had come to respect. He walked until he reached the center of the courtyard. The vanguard soldiers halted when they saw him. A single human against their entire force was an absurd sight, yet something about his stance unsettled them. The commander barked a threat that echoed around the shattered hall. Darren did not respond. He simply planted his feet. The first wave charged. Darren moved. What happened next became a tale that would spread across the galaxy for generations. He met the first soldier with a strike so precise and powerful that the enemy armor dented inward. Before the next attacker reached him, Darren pivoted and drove his elbow into the second soldier's chest plate. Energy blasts streaked toward him from the rear lines, but he rolled across the stone tiles with impossible speed and rose without losing momentum. The Empress watched with disbelief. She had known humans were adaptable, but she had not known they could be so overwhelmingly fierce when fighting for something beyond themselves. Darren fought like a force that refused to yield. He seized a fallen energy staff and swept it around in a blazing arc. The staff became a whirling barrier that shattered incoming shots and sent attackers stumbling back. Every breath he took seemed timed with the beat of battle, as if combat flowed through him like a natural instinct. Soon the courtyard filled with sparks, smoke, and the ringing of metal. Bodies fell around him. Broken armor scattered across the floor. Yet Darren did not slow. The enemy commander realized the threat too late. He called for reinforcements. More troops poured through the gates. Darren pushed forward while the Empress felt an unfamiliar pull inside her chest. Until today, she believed she had walked her path alone, carrying the weight of an empire that no longer wished to fight. Now a human stood defying armies on her behalf. She descended the terrace steps with a new determination, refusing to leave him to stand alone. She reached the courtyard and raised her hand. A beam of azure light burst from her palm. It carved a glowing line across the advancing troops. Even weakened by months of conflict, she still commanded a power that bent the air around her. Darren noticed her arrival and gave a brief nod. He did not speak, but the meaning was clear. They would stand together. More enemy aircraft circled overhead and began targeting the terrace. Plasma fire rained down. Columns collapsed. The palace trembled. Darren grabbed the Empress and pulled her behind a fallen slab of stone. She protested that he should not shield her with his own body. He said her kingdom needed her alive more than it needed him unscathed. She grew quiet at that. He rose again and sprinted toward the next wave of attackers. He leaped onto a shattered pillar, vaulted into the air, and slammed into a gunner perched on a moving platform. The platform veered and crashed. Flames surged upward with a deafening roar. The Empress joined the fight again, sending shockwaves that ripped across the battlefield. Despite her strength, she felt her energy draining fast. And pushed deeper into the enemy formation and cut through their lines with relentless precision. He seemed to grow stronger the longer he fought. When he landed on the ground again, his footing caused a crack to shoot through the stone floor. The enemy troops hesitated. They had marched across half the galaxy without fear. Now they feared one human. Their commander gave a final order to direct all fire toward Darren. Dozens of rifles turned toward him. The Empress gasped and tried to warn him, but the shots fired before she spoke. A wall of energy surged. Darren dropped to one knee and braced himself. The blast engulfed him. Dust rose. For a moment all sound ceased. The Empress froze with her heart pounding like a drum. When the dust settled, Darren still knelt in the crater. His arms shook, but he remained upright. Steam rose from his skin. The palace lights reflected off the cracked ground beneath him. The enemy commanders stared with disbelief. Darren slowly stood again. His voice rang across the courtyard. He told them if this was all they had, they should turn back now. The commander responded with rage and charged forward. Darren met him halfway. Their clash sent a shockwave through the entire courtyard. Sparks erupted with each strike. The commander swung with brute strength, but Darren countered with precision. Step by step, he dismantled the enemy's attack until he forced the commander off balance. With a final strike, Darren sent him crashing to the ground. The remaining troops wavered. Some backed away. Some dropped their weapons. Their line collapsed. The palace defenders who had fled earlier peeked from the shadows and realized the tide had turned. A human had held the line when all others fell. The enemy ships began retreating from the sky. Their ground forces scattered. The invasion that had seemed unstoppable wavered under the weight of one warrior's stand. The Empress walked toward Darren. She stopped only inches away and looked at him with eyes full of quiet awe. She asked how he could fight like that when the odds were impossible. Darren answered that he had seen hopeless battles all his life. He said he learned that hopelessness breaks only those who allow it. He said he refused to allow it. She placed a hand on his arm to steady him when she saw he was still trembling from the blast he had endured. She thanked him. Her voice was firm, but carried a hint of emotion she rarely allowed herself to reveal. Darren told her he did not protect her because she was a ruler. He protected her because she had not surrendered her conviction, even when everyone else surrendered their courage. She lowered her head for a moment. She had been taught that ruling meant standing above all others. Yet today she felt side by side with someone who carried a strength that belonged to no crown. The sun dipped behind the ruined towers. Smoke